Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Law and Finance Show. And today we have a great guest on because one of the great things about running a business is the fact that you're not just stuck to doing the technical work only in your business. There's so many other things. Now, if you have some people, that may not be the great thing. But I'm excited about talking with this guest because something a lot of firms struggle with is capturing testimonials, is how do you capture the excitement of all these amazing people that you have helped and all these amazing services you have provided. But if you don't have a way of capturing that, no one knows how great your service is. So I'm excited to talk to a guest that is running an amazing law firm that has done an amazing job of capturing those testimonials. And we're going to dive into her story. So stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, Maya Gray, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. My pleasure. I've been looking forward to this conversation because, I would say, in all transparency, this has been a area we've struggled with in our accounting firm is how do you capture testimonials? So I have been looking forward to this conversation. But before we jump into that, for those that may not be familiar with you and your law firm, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into practicing law?
Sure. So I was actually a second and third grade teacher for 5 years. I had no desire to practice law at all, and I loved what I was doing. But sadly, as is the case for many teachers, it was really rough emotionally and financially. I live in California in the Bay Area, and there's not a great pay rate for teachers. And I just had some kids that were really struggling. And while it really fulfilled me emotionally, I found myself getting drained, and I kind of wondered what else was out there. So both my parents are lawyers, and I thought, why don't I just see what it's like? And if I hate it, I can always go back to teaching. And if I love it, then I found a new career. So that's kind of how I discovered the law. I ended up loving law school and got an internship in family law, and that's what led me to where I am today.
Awesome. Now, what type of law did your parents practice?
So my mom worked for the State Bar of California. I think she was general counsel. My dad, he did some environmental policy work. I think he may correct me. I didn't know too much about what they were doing day to day, but I knew that I was really intrigued um, by their field. So, and my stepdad's also a lawyer. So I have a lot of lawyers around me that it seemed like they enjoyed what they did, and I wanted to try it.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'm curious, with having lawyers around you, like I said, you first went the education route as a teacher. When you went to law school, did it kind of live up to your expectations, or was it, a culture shock, or it was somewhere in between?
Yeah, it was really a rough transition. I think being a teacher was, as I mentioned, really fulfilling emotionally because every day you're with people who, kids love their teachers and they want to learn, and you feel very needed. And you can immediately see the impact of your work on a day to day basis. And so leaving that, going to law school was really challenging. I felt oftentimes, um, I don't know if depressed is a word, but just, it went from being around a lot of youthful energy to being with people that oftentimes viewed you as their competition instead of as a collaborator. So that was really difficult. But as time went on, I think really as I found friends in law school, and especially with my first real job, I found the community that I was looking for. There's still days that I miss the energy of being a teacher, but I feel like in the end, I made the right move.
Gotcha, gotcha. Hopefully you get a chance to like go back for like career day every now and then.
Yeah, yeah. For a few years, I would go back to check up on my kids.
Awesome, awesome. I think you bring up a really good point. I wanted to ask another question about that. You talk about you know, coming out of, in school, there's this heightened sense of this competition. I mean, with other students that are going through a similar program, or whether you're competing for, hey, who's going to get that spot in the firms. And you mentioned about like finding your community after, you landed your first job with the first company that you worked with. Like, was that something that resulted from just a community at the firm that you work with, or was it something that happened outside of the firm? Like, how did you come about finding that community?
That's a really good question. I think when I was actually preparing for today, I was thinking about what was really important to me as a lawyer. And it's actually something that's been similar for me, just what's important to me as a human, as a teacher. And that's kind of this mindset of that there's an abundance and not a scarcity. So I think in law school, there is a scarcity mindset of you can only award, so many A's and so many B's. And so for a lot of people, they weren't willing to study together. But I always felt like you kind of get what you put out. And so I was able to find people in law school that felt similarly to that philosophy that, you're always willing to help somebody. And you're not doing it because you want that in return, but it ends up just happening that way. And when I went to look for my first job after law school, my first job that I was actually licensed as a lawyer, because I did an internship before that, just the questions that they asked me, it immediately made me feel like they shared that similar mindset, that they were, kind of together as a work family, and that it was always okay to have questions, that there wasn't a limited frame of mind there.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think, I'm not a lawyer, but I do think that oftentimes lawyers do get this bad persona or representation. And I think a lot of it comes probably from movies and TV shows of like lawyers don't get presented in the best light all the time.
Agreed. And there are people out there that are like that. But I just think if you can operate from a place of openness and being able to share your knowledge and share your skills, I think that in the end it does come back to you as well.
Awesome. So how did that journey unfold for you of, navigating, you started with a firm, and then eventually you launched your own firm. So how did that journey kind of unfold for you?
It was really kind of a complete surprise. I had never been a person that wanted to be my own boss. I never wanted to run my own firm. But just as time went on, I think I was at the firm for a little over 7 years. I started to feel ready to kind of spread my wings and fly and wanted to take on more of my own cases. And so it was actually right before the pandemic. I think it was 3 weeks before the pandemic. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do this. I'm going to start my own firm. And I had always been really daunted by what I didn't know. I thought that I would need a lot of machines because at our firm we had this really expensive copy machine. And I remember that because it really stood out to me. Like, I can't open my own firm because I can't afford this one machine. And I had a friend that she went out on her own a few years before me. And I just called her and said, "Hey, do you mind like running through, what does it take to have your own business?" And the way that she broke it down just made it so manageable. And I realized that a lot of what I needed was, on the cloud or on the internet. And I really didn't need these fancy machines. So with her encouragement, my husband's encouragement, I just decided to do it. And I told my firm I was leaving and starting my own practice. And then the pandemic happened. And I had thought that I was gonna, have this nice office and have clients there. And, obviously that wasn't able to happen. But it also has been, um, even though it was difficult at first to really figure out the nuts and bolts of how do you have your own practice, it was such a blessing because I had the flexibility to be at home with my kids, especially during the pandemic.
Awesome. I wonder how many people also have like some of those same reservations of like, I see like the law firm that I'm at. I see what the end product of running a law firm looks like, and I'm not ready to jump and do all of this way. Like you said, have the big office space, the copier, go out and hire a bunch of people. I mean, it's like I wonder how many other people are hesitant because they're seeing the same thing the same way.
Yeah, I had no idea I think really all you need is like you need a laptop and you need a basic printer that can print in black and white. I mean, that's really the two main things, and you know, a few kind of internet platforms, but it's not as daunting as you might think it would be.
Awesome. Now, I guess for you, you mentioned that about, when you started your firm, hey, you decided to leave and then the pandemic happened. So there was probably a world of like new methods that you were trying to figure out and navigate because you just didn't practice law the same way during the pandemic that you did prior to it. So, um, can you tell us a little bit about kind of what that experience was like of figuring out how to run your own firm and figuring out how to still practice law during the pandemic?
Yeah, it was it was definitely challenging. I think that being your own boss is very different than just practicing law in someone else's firm, because the buck stops with you for everything. So you're responsible for everything from your website to running your books to advertising to billing. And I really didn't know the scope of that. So it was a real learning curve. I mean, one of the things I remember most is I have had no experience creating a website whatsoever. And I also didn't want to spend a lot of money on hiring a web designer. So I just I found this domain. It's called HostGator, and they actually offered a free website. And so my website is not fancy at all, but I think it conveys at least the pertinent information about my business. And I just spent a long time creating it. Like after dinner, my kids went to bed, I'd work on it. So that was really unexpected, was just how much time it would take to kind of do those things I took for granted at the firm. Same thing with trying to choose different platforms. So, as an attorney, you have usually somewhere that you are keeping track of your time, running bills. You have to input your expenses, all these things that I didn't know. And so I really reached out to different people that I knew and said, hey, what do you use? And so I would say one of the biggest surprises from going from a firm to my own business was just how much time it would take to research all of the different available options and then really selecting one.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I guess in that process, did you find any tools or resources or website that kind of helped you narrow some of the options down?
I have to say that I ended up going with if I talked to people and I heard that particular platform more than once, I figured it was probably a good one. So I would say that my biggest resource were other attorneys, and that's
Gotcha.
generally how I ended up on most of the platforms I use today.
Mhm. Awesome. I find that it very interesting because like one of the I guess one of the roles that I play, I sit on one of the planning committee for the ABA, or I guess the law practice division within the ABA, and I'm on the technology committee, and that was one of the conversations that we have. It's like a lot of times these different technologies and tools, a lot of them tell you they do the same exact thing to where it's like unless you have like a deep knowledge of them, it's like it's difficult for you to know, like, okay, which one really is the right one because everybody says they do the same thing.
Yeah. And I think what's good, at least for me, when I first started, I definitely was looking for ways to save costs. And so if different platforms were offering, trial periods or discounts, that was a big attraction for me. So there were some platforms that would give you the first 3 months for free or discounted. That was really helpful. And a lot of times, some things can be completely free if you're willing to do it yourself. So the website's an example. Um, there are definitely opportunities out there if you do some Googling. Same thing with, when I started my business, I started as an LLP, and you have to file a lot of documents with the Secretary of State. So I think if I had maybe a larger pot of cash sitting around, maybe I would have hired someone else to do it all, but I ended up doing it myself and I saved a lot of money. And so just kind of one tip, if you're thinking of starting your own business, if you're willing to put in some time to do certain things, you can save money that way.
Mhm. Awesome. Awesome. Now one of the things that something else that I'm curious about, because you've mentioned it a couple times about, just reaching out to other lawyers, just kind of asking questions, you know, How did you find that experience? Did you find that there were a lot of lawyers who were pretty open about helping, providing some advice, or was it challenging to find lawyers who were willing to kind of share some of their story?
No, I found that people were really happy to help provide their insight. So what I did is when I started, right before I started the firm, I thought about who do I know in the family law field that went out on their own. And I sent an email out to each one of them and just asked that they be willing to chat with me for 15 minutes on the phone to get their feedback about what that process had been like. And every single one that I reached out to, they were happy to talk to me about their experience. And it was really that way that I learned some, to do's and to don'ts, some pitfalls, things to watch out for. That was a really great asset. And then another thing that was really helpful was my friend who went out on her own. She was part of a family law kind of mentoring group. And it's a group of family law women who all have their own practice. And we meet once a month via Zoom. And so I was lucky enough to be welcomed into that group, and they helped answer a lot of questions I had as well about the initial kind of forming of a business and what it was like to be on my own. Because I think that one thing that you can really miss about being in a firm is that when you're by yourself, there's no one there to really talk to. Before, I was used to being able to go into someone's office and just say, hey, let me tell you about this case, or how's your day? And for me, I'm at home all day, which can be sometimes lonely. So having a mentoring group or someone that you can talk to when you have a question about things has been really invaluable.
Awesome. Now, I'm curious also about the one topic that really caught my attention when I came across your website, is because I usually don't see this on a lot of websites. Is, there's a section that you have where you can actually see the testimonials. And then when I went to it, I was like, okay, in the rare case that you do find that on someone's website, maybe they have one or two. But then I started scrolling. I'm like, man, there's this long list of like these people are happy to do business with her. You know, like first I want to talk about what are the types of, law that you practice. And then I want to talk about, just kind of, the testimonials and how it was capturing those. So what types of law do you practice, and what types of problems do you help your clients solve?
Sure. So I am a family law attorney, which essentially covers everything to do with the family. So I do divorce, separations, custody, support, parentage actions, prenups, mediation, things like that. And so most of my clients, they're going through some of the worst periods in their life. And they come to me when things have really gone wrong. So I try to be, really cognizant of the privilege that I have that I'm working with my clients. And then your next question was about kind of how I got the testimonials.
Yes.
Okay, so it's hard, right? Because I never want my clients to feel like they are just a consumer and that what I'm after is the ultimate review. So I always wait until a case is completely done, until my clients have their retainer funds back, so they don't feel like they owe me anything. And then if it's a client that I think had a positive experience with me, what I do is I send out an email that essentially says, it's really been a privilege to help serve you. And if you have had a positive experience with me, I would greatly appreciate you writing a review. Now, one thing that lawyers have that not every industry has is there's a website called Avvo, AVVO. And it's a platform where people can search for attorneys. They can post reviews. And so what I say in my email to them is, if you'd be willing to give me a 5-star review, here's a link to both Avvo, where you can post anonymously if you want, or to Google, whichever one you prefer. And I always add the caveat that if they're too busy, or they don't feel comfortable, or they don't want to, then of course they don't have to. And so I've been really honored and pleased with the amount of clients that have been willing to write a review. I think about my own experiences and how it's kind of like Yelp, how you may have eaten at a restaurant, you may have loved that dish, but you may not have always written a review afterwards. But I bet if that, if the chef reached out to you and said, hey, what did you think about this meal? Would you be willing to write a review? I think most people would. So the first tip I have is don't be afraid to reach out if you think that you had a good relationship with your client. And then two, is make it really clear that what you're looking for is, in most things it's 5 stars, because I did have one client, a former client, and she was, very nice. We had a great relationship, but she wrote a 1-sentence review and it was 4 stars. And actually Avo hit it. So I never saw what it was, but she told me she had reviewed it. And when I contacted them, they said, oh, we're happy to post it for you if you'd like. And it ended up being 4 stars, which in the end actually kind of lowers your average. And I don't think that, she meant anything negative by it, but really from that experience, I learned to ask for whatever the maximum rating is. And so then what I do is if they're willing to post it on Avo and they're willing to put their name, then it tells me that, they don't want to be let me rephrase it. They post it on Avo and I use their name, then I feel more at liberty with taking that review and posting it on my website. I would never post a review from anyone who wanted to remain anonymous.
Gotcha. Okay. Awesome. I love it. Now, I guess for you, as you're, growing the business and you're working with more clients, how has the testimonials impacted like your ability to attract the attention of more clients?
I think that it has really helped. I do have people that call me and tell me that they've read the testimonials on my profile and that was a big attractor for me. But unless they mention that, I don't always know. So I try to think of it as when I'm looking on different websites for different services, I'm definitely more likely to pick someone where there are a lot of testimonials than someone that has none. It's not always end all be all, because sometimes you'll talk to that person and you end up not liking them, but it helps to know that someone has positive reviews. So I think it's definitely been a positive for my business.
Awesome. Now, there's something else you mentioned too about, I mean, I think with, you know, in building a business, a lot of times there are a lot of people who have a family. They have, they have small children. They're building a business. I guess for you as a parent, like, how does it feel knowing that your children are seeing their mom go out and win in her business in this awesome way, and that you're building something that you're proud of? How does that feel?
Oh, well, that's a nice way of putting it. Thank you. It feels really, it feels powerful. And, I try to really come from the philosophy of I get to go to work and how lucky am I, not I have to work. And so I try to use that terminology when I talk to my kids of mommy gets to go to work now. I get to help people. I want them to see that they don't have to work at a job that they dislike. Um, and that it can be really powerful to set your own hours to do what you want to do. So I like the thought that they're seeing that example. And also what's really amazing is when I was at a firm, I really didn't have a lot of flexibility in my schedule. So I couldn't just take off and, go to the kids' play or on a field trip. And now running my own business, I have complete control over, when I want to be in the office, quote unquote, or when I need to be doing something else.
Awesome. I love it. Well, before we wrap up, final question that I have for you. I mean, I think we've talked about several amazing things. So if you were talking to someone and you said, hey, I was on the Law and Finance show with Terrell Turner, and you should go back and listen to my conversation that I had with him. And when you listen, here are 2 things you should listen for. What would be your 2 big takeaways?
I think the number one thing that I would tell people is don't be afraid to ask for help, because there are so many resources out there. There are so many people that are willing to give you their time and their experience to help you become a better practitioner. So to me, that's number one. And number 2 is, you know, there are a lot of ways you can make money, but sometimes that way is not always worth it. And so one of the things I've really tried to implement in my business is I don't want to take a case that's going to negatively impact, my personal life or my emotional sanity. No matter how much the money is, it's just not worth it. So to really be kind of choosy when taking cases to make sure that it's a right fit for you.
Awesome. I love it. Well, Maya, thank you so much for coming on and being an amazing guest. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was an honor.
If you're looking for ideas on how to manage and grow a profitable law firm, this Facebook group is perfect for you because every week we are featuring conversations with successful lawyers and businesses related to law firms on tips, ideas, and technology that are helping many people grow and manage a profitable law firm. So if you're looking for great tips and ideas, you definitely want to click the link below so you can join the conversation and be part of the Law Firms and Finance Facebook group.